Welcome to Audacity Works, a podcast inspired by and dedicated to the working artist, the creative entrepreneur, and generally, doing the damn thing. This exists on the premise that the world belongs to those who have the audacity to believe that their lives have value. This is for you. Welcome to Audacity Works. I am your host, Rachel Strickland, and this is episode number 127. And it's another episode about perfectionism. Yes, it is. I just realized I'm doing like the podcast voice. Anytime I catch myself, this is the podcast voice. I don't know what to do with myself. When I listen back to it, I'm like, who is that? Anyway, before we get into the episode, I just wanted to do a bit of updates for you. It's been a minute. So here's what's going on over here. There are 2 places left for Creatrix 2025, which is taking place on Edisto Island in South Carolina, mid-May. And I'll put a link in the show notes with all of the details, but there are 2 beds available. I would love to fill them with some creative, hungry, witchy wonder, such as one of you listening. And what the price of each bed includes, and there are different price points according to whether you get the bed that's in the dormitory or the shared room that is left. And they all include 5 nights of accommodation in this big, gorgeous house with a huge screened-in porch that's right on the tidal creek. And you can see the ocean, and you can hear the ocean, and you can smell the ocean. And it also comes with all meals. Breakfast is self-catered, but provided to your specifications. And lunch and dinner are catered by our amazing kitchen witch, Lexa Walsh, who is such a master of her craft, and all dietary restrictions are provided for. Yes, even the tricky ones. Now that's just accommodations and food, right? So what is the actual programming itself, you might be wondering? Well, in the mornings we have sessions with me where I teach you witchcraft. And if you want specifics, we're going to do a lot of shadow work, and I'll teach you some techniques for clairvoyance, clairsentience, and channeling. And we'll make an altar together. And we're also going to learn how to make essences and some other rituals. And in the afternoons, we have a couple of movement tasters from guest teachers just to shake up your routine and let you use your creativity in new ways, use your body in new ways. Very accessible. And you're not supposed to be good at these, right? It's just something to taste. And then in the late afternoon, we have some optional activities like impersonating a lizard on the big lily pad float that I'm going to bring and put in the tidal creek, and going for bike rides like Now and Then style, and making seashell mementos and fun stuff like that. All of these are optional, by the way, because if you got to it and you're like, you know what I'd really like to do is take a nap, then you should go take a nap. There's a hammock. It's right there. Go nap. But the whole retreat is designed to give you some space to just exist and play with your creativity and be with your creativity. So it's not an action-packed schedule, and that is on purpose. I made it so that people had the room to get bored. So if you would like to come get blissfully bored with me, please do. And if you have questions, you can always reach out to me. Okay, onwards. I'm going to give you some life updates. Here in South Carolina, spring has absolutely sprung. There is an azalea bush outside my window that is lit up on fire. It's gorgeous. And it's like this every year in South Carolina for a month, the azaleas bloom. It is also the great pollinating and my annual time of gratitude that I don't have pollen allergies. And I'm very grateful that I don't have any travel happening right now. Haven't traveled since the very beginning of March. And there's no travel in the foreseeable future until July for the Irish Aerial Dance Festival. And I'm so grateful that I just get to be here and run my business and coach the Audacity project and make my work, which, by the way, I have a date for a chunk of, like a significant chunk of, and I'm going to be telling my patrons about that this week. So, yeah, it's exciting. It's terrifying. I love it. And next week, my dad, Papa Bear, Doc, he's getting his right hip replaced. It really, really needs it. The left one was done in like 2017, and he recovered really well from that. He's a pretty robust guy. I just took him to the cardiologist this morning, and they were like, your heart rate is like a tortoise. And he's like, yep. They're like, do you ever have weakness? Are you dizzy? And he's like, nope. And they're like, okay, well, if you can climb 2 flights of stairs without stopping or getting dizzy, then you can have your surgery next week. So we left there and we went across the street and there was like this 4-story building across the street, which is rare in Charleston. And I was like, all right, Dad, climb the stairs. He went up 4 flights of stairs without stopping. I could barely keep up with him. And then he came down the stairs on his arms like a gorilla, like on supporting his weight on the railing, and complete with gorilla noises. So yeah, we got the green light for surgery. It's very good news, and that's going to be next week. I just wanted to share that because good news is kind of rare these days, and I had good news today. So there you go. So, all right, let's get into the episode now. Let's talk about this perfectionism bullshit, because it is bullshit. And I want to be really specific about the way that I'm using that word, because I have students who are perfectionists in a way that I'm not using that word, which just means they have a really high standard of excellence, but it does not inhibit their creation. Perfectionism is only bullshit and like oppressive if it's stopping you. So me personally, I don't call that perfectionism, because I view perfectionism as a very specific kind of psychological landscape in which your inability to make a mistake or to feel allowed to make a mistake prohibits you from doing anything. And for some people, they just have a really high standard of excellence, but it doesn't inhibit their production. Ugh, did I just say production? I hate that. I'm leaving all this in, okay? It doesn't inhibit their ability to create work. So in my personal lexicon, I won't be calling that perfectionism, even though everyone gets to decide what a word means as it applies to them and define our own experience. So I just wanted to add that caveat, because that experience is completely valid, and I just want to make room for that. And to be specific that when I say perfectionism, I'm not talking about people with a high standard of excellence that make their work regardless. So today's subject was not by request, although I am up to my armpits in recovering perfectionists. But rather, it was inspired by an email that I got because I'm subscribed to the Substack of Caroline Perez, who wrote Invisible Women. If you have not read Invisible Women, highly recommend it. I'll put a link to that book in the show notes, and I'm also going to link to the URL so you can read this article for yourself. It's called The Perfection Trap, and it is about how women and AFAB people are held to perfectionist standards with consequences that are much harsher for failing to live up to perfection, which is of course impossible, than men. So I'm going to give you a quote from this article, and please, go read it for yourself. It is quite fabulous, especially the part entitled "Making Mistakes While Having the Bad Taste to Be Female." Oh, it's so good. But the author goes on to say, and I quote, about her perfectionism, quote, "And again, I don't believe that my perfectionism is a syndrome or a disorder or an irrational position. I think rather that it is a very rational response to a world that I know judges me more harshly as a woman, in particular, a woman who is violating several gendered norms at once. End quote. And I love this take so much because it points out the flaw in how these psychological battlefields like imposter syndrome, or rather imposter phenomenon, and debilitating perfectionism are addressed in popular culture, because they are generally, or rather the advice generally, is to be a bit victim blamey, or a lot victim blamey. Like, well, yeah, obviously you just need to like correct this in yourself, which is exactly kind of the point of the whole thing. And as I read this article and then decided to record this podcast, I saw it happening to me in real fucking time. Okay? I'm like, wow, this is like such a good article. I think I want to talk about this. I'm like, well, no, you can't talk about that, because then you're just talking about something that someone else said. You have to, of course, think up an entirely original concept that's never existed before and then record a podcast about it. Do you see what happened there? It was happening to me in real time. Perfectionism was happening to me in real time. Like, anything that is worth saying must belong completely to you, be completely original, never having been said before, and it must blow the poop out of everybody's butts. Otherwise, why bother saying it? Well, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Would anyone ever say anything at all? So, of course, because my favorite medicine for recovering perfectionism is to make something and to make a mess, much like perhaps areas of this podcast are a mess, I did just use the phrase blow the poop out of everybody's butts twice now. And I'm leaving it all in, because I do not subscribe to perfectionism in this way, in the way that the high standards of excellence that I have for my work will prevent me from creating the work. And I absolutely include the podcast in that. And I have recorded episodes about perfectionism before, and I will link that in the show notes. But it's not like it stopped being a problem for people. And I come up against it daily, especially right now, because I'm running a cycle of the Audacity Project. And the people that come through the Audacity Project are by and large marginalized people. They're women, they're queer, they're trans, they're melanated. I think I have had 2 straight white cis men in the Audacity Project, which isn't to say they aren't welcome. They are. But 2 out of over 350 artists, 2 have been straight, cis, white men. That's less than 1%, which means the 99.9% feel a pressure to be without flaw, faultless, and bulletproof in all of the ways in which they show up in their worlds. Not to say that the straight white men don't feel that way also, but I'll use the word punishment. The punishment is harsher for marginalized people. I also neglected to put neurodivergent into that list. And if you say neurodivergent, I'm pretty sure it is everyone that I've ever worked with. So that brings us up to 100%. So while every person in the world might feel pressure to be bulletproof in how they interact with the world at large, the consequences of not being bulletproof are harsher for those who are marginalized, according to race, gender, identity, sexuality, and neurotype. So the last thing I want to do is look at this huge section of people and be like, oh, you feel restricted by a sense of perfectionism. You should fix that. Yeah, you should change that about yourself. as though it is a moral failing or a flaw of some kind to feel the rational consequences of operating under a suppressive system of metrics and expectations. And all of these words are just here to remind you that it's not your fault and there's nothing wrong with you. You don't have a moral failing if you feel stuttered by perfectionism or any other psychological hurdle for that matter. Because I think it's so important, that first step of realizing that, like, you didn't put that there. It's not from you. And realizing that is the first step to being able to test the waters into operating outside of that system. And I think ultimately it often comes back to safety. Like, well, it is not safe to be flawed. It is less safe to make mistakes. And in the denizen of arts and creativity, it's the hammering of the nail into the coffin. And when the coffin is shut, you just don't make things anymore because you can't be allowed to make something bad or to make a mistake or look like you don't already have all the answers or have a perfectly curated and pleasing to the eye Instagram feed. Because if those are the requirements to make anything, ain't nobody gonna be making anything. Essentially, to work in the arts and to be a working artist is to be unsafe. There is no safety. There is no safety. At least not the kind of safety that we can get like from an outside source or from a larger picture of what culture is. Now, hopefully, we can find and facilitate a sense of safety within ourselves and within our local cultures. And when I say local, I don't just mean where you live, although that is exceedingly important. But also the culture that you operate in an online space, or the international cultures that you participate in, whether it's in person or online. And I hope that we can facilitate those spaces for ourselves and for each other by not only not holding people to a status in which they are unallowed to make any kind of mistake or to be flawed or to say something problematic, because people are going to do that. We're going to do it. Like, who among us has ever opened their mouths and let some bullshit fall out of it and then been like, I cannot believe I just said that. So that's why I wanted to record this episode. One, I saw it happening to myself in real time and I'm like, well, now I have to talk about it. And two, because the first step in dipping a toe outside of like this perfectionist sphere is knowing that like it's not you. You didn't create it. You didn't put it on yourself. It's just here. And then hopefully we can engender some amount of safety for ourselves and for each other by giving each other grace and helping each other celebrate when we do get rejected by things and when we do make mistakes. I don't mean like, oh, yay, you fucked up, do it again. But also kinda like, hey, you made a mistake. Can you own it? And like, we can move on with our lives and perhaps learn something and then make another mistake, but better. And the other side of that is thinking about the way I just said that. Like, okay, you fucked up. Can we move on? Can we fuck up in a better way? But that also precludes that the metric for success is getting the correct answer, which is still perfectionism. What if the point is not to be correct? And I'm not even going to offer up an alternative point, because it still leads all to the same place. It's like, well, where are we trying to get to? Let's get there in the most efficient way possible and the most correct way possible. No, fuck it. Because if there was a point, and like if that point were, as I'm thinking of right now, to be as alive as possible and as interconnected with each other as possible, to just be fully alive, If that is the point, and I think it's a better point, we don't get there by being correct all the time. And it's also not a place to get to. It's a place that you do things from. I'm looking at the time. I have just passed the 20-minute mark on this diatribe in which I basically agree with Caroline Perez, and why wouldn't I? And I just want to invite you to look at how this ideal of being correct and getting the answer right influences your lives in all kinds of insidious ways, in hidden ways, subversive ways, and questioning, like, have I hidden the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow in my brain as the right answer? And that if I'm correct, then everything else will be fine. So I guess go out there and be incorrect and fuck something up and revel in your sublime human right to do so. Thank you so very much for spending this time with me. Just like one quick note, the Irish Aerial Dance Festival is open for bookings, and I'm going to put the link to that in the show notes on the very slim chance that you have not done so already or know about this wonderful festival. Can't wait to meet you if I've not met you there before. If you have requests for future podcasts, you can reach me always on Instagram at Rachel Strickland Creative or on Patreon at Rachel Strickland Creative. This podcast is powered by Patreon, and I got to give it a shout out to my patrons. Oh, you give me life, like quite literally make life possible. Thank you so much. Thank you for believing in me and for trusting me and standing with me. It means everything. And either supporting me there or sharing this podcast with someone that you thought it could help, or both, is the best compliment you could give me. So thank you for being here. Go out there and enjoy your right to be incorrect. And don't go back to sleep.